He was a king. He had power. He had armies. He had wealth that most people couldn't even imagine. And he wrote this, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish?" That's not a weak man. That's not a faithless man. That is David, King of Israel, the man God himself called a man after my own heart. And he felt completely abandoned by God. Here's what nobody tells you about the book of Psalms. Most people think it's a book of worship songs, pretty verses for greeting cards, comfort for funerals. But if you actually read it, cover to cover, it reads more like a man's private journal during the worst seasons of his life. Depression, betrayal, guilt so heavy he says his bones are wasting away, rage so raw he asks God to break the teeth of his enemies. This is not polished religion. This is a human being bleeding onto a page, and somehow that is what God preserved for thousands of years. Why? Stay with me. Because what the book of Psalms is really teaching us about prayer, about pain, about God, will change the way you talk to him forever. Story 130 to 630. Before we understand the Psalms, we have to understand the man behind most of them. David didn't start as a king. He started as the youngest of 8 brothers, the one nobody thought mattered. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, David's own father didn't even bother calling him in from the fields. He was out watching sheep, alone, forgotten, and God chose him. But here's the thing. Being chosen by God did not make David's life easier. It made it harder. After God chose him, David spent years being hunted by the very king he had served loyally. King Saul became obsessed with destroying him. David lived in caves. He hid in the wilderness. He ate scraps. He watched men die because of him. And it was in those caves, literally hiding for his life in the dark, that he wrote some of the most powerful words ever recorded. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Read that again with context. This isn't a man sitting comfortably in a church pew. This is a man in a cave, hunted, exhausted, writing about a God who still provides. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." He wasn't writing that from safety. He was writing it from inside the valley. That changes everything about what those words mean. Then David becomes king, and you'd think, finally peace, finally rest. But the Psalms don't stop being desperate after he becomes king. They get more desperate. Because David carries something heavier than poverty or persecution. He carries his own failures. He sees a woman named Bathsheba. He wants her. He takes her, even though she is married. And then, to cover it up, he arranges for her husband Uriah to be placed at the front of battle, where he is killed. David, the man after God's own heart, a murderer and an adulterer, and the weight of it destroys him from the inside. He writes Psalm 51, and it is one of the most gut-wrenching confessions in human history. "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me." Always before me. That phrase. He can't escape it. He closes his eyes and it's there. He tries to pray and it rises up. He looks at his own hands and he sees what they did. "My bones waste away through my groaning all day long. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. You lay me in the dust of death." This is a king, the most powerful man in Israel, reduced to dust by guilt. And then the Psalms shift again. Because David's failures don't just affect him. His son Absalom, his own child, rises up in rebellion and tries to take the throne by force. David has to flee Jerusalem, his own city, his own palace, barefoot, weeping, betrayed by his son. He writes while running, "Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him." And then in the very next breath, "But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. Do you see what's happening? In the same psalm, the same breath, terror and trust, despair and defiance. He doesn't resolve the tension, he holds both at the same time. That is the genius of the Psalms. That is what makes them different from every other religious text ever written. Most religion tells you what to believe. The Psalms show you what it actually feels like to believe it, in the middle of everything falling apart. David rages. Psalm 109, he asks God to let his enemies' children be fatherless, his wife a widow, his possessions seized. He is not editing himself. He is not performing holiness. He is laying his darkest thoughts before God and trusting God to handle them. And then, the Psalms that take your breath away entirely. Psalm 22 opens with, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The very words Jesus would cry from the cross 1,000 years later. David wrote it. Jesus lived it. The connection across time is staggering. Psalm 23, written by a shepherd, about a shepherd God, for every person who has ever walked through a valley they didn't choose. Psalm 139, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. A man who hid in caves, a man who ran from his own son, a man who could not escape his own guilt, writing that there is nowhere in existence that God is not present. He didn't write that because life got easy. He wrote it because he discovered something deeper than circumstances. Here is the twist that most people completely miss about the book of Psalms. It is not a book about how to feel better. It is a book about what to do with how you actually feel. Every psalm follows a pattern, even the darkest ones. They begin in honesty. They move through the fire, and almost every single one ends in a place that is not where it started. Not because the circumstances changed, but because the act of bringing it to God, all of it, the rage, the grief, the guilt, the confusion, somehow shifts something. David never pretends, he never performs, he never gives God the answer he thinks God wants. And that is precisely why God called him a man after my own heart. Not because David was good. David was deeply flawed, adulterer, murderer, failure as a father, complicated as a king. God called him that because David was real, because David brought every single broken piece of himself to God instead of hiding it. The twist is this: the Psalms are not in the Bible to show you a perfect man's perfect faith. They are there to give you permission to be honest, to tell God I feel abandoned and keep going, to tell God I am crushed by what I did and keep going, to tell God my enemies surround me and I am terrified and keep going. The Psalms are proof that God can handle your honesty. More than that, God preserved it. He put David's darkest prayers in a book and said, "Keep these, for everyone, forever." Because someone thousands of years from now is going to be in a cave, or running from their own failures, or lying awake unable to escape what they've done, or watching everything they built fall apart. And they are going to need to know, someone else felt this too, and they survived it, and God was there in every single verse of it. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. David wrote that, not from the morning, from the middle of the night. That is the most important thing about the book of Psalms. It does not promise you a life without darkness. It promises you that in the darkness you are not alone, and that the God who created the stars can hear a whisper from the bottom of a cave. You don't have to clean yourself up before you come to him. You just have to come. If the book of Psalms moved you, the next video covers the book of Esther. A woman with no power, no army, and no guarantee, who changed the fate of an entire nation with 3 words: "If I perish, I perish." Link is right up here.